I have a very exciting episode for you today. This is Science Fans. I'm joined by not one, but two exceptional people from very different sides of the climate solutions equation. Dr. Brenda Ekwurzel is a multidisciplinary climate scientist whose work has taken her everywhere from the frigid Arctic to the arid deserts of the American Southwest. She was named a Fellow of the American Academy for the Advancement of Science for the American Academy of the Advancement of Science in 2016, and she currently serves as the Director of Scientific Excellence for the Union of Concerned Scientists. Clearly, science is what gets Brenda out of bed in the morning. In addition to this scientific rock star, I'd also like to welcome Eric Balfour.
Are you actually going to try to give me an introduction after that?
Yes, you get one, whether or not you want it.
Yeah, great.
So, despite his modesty, if Eric looks familiar to you, it's probably because you've seen him on screen. In 24, The OC, full disclosure, I totally watched The OC in college, Haven, and many more, as well as movies, etc., etc. You've seen him before, I guarantee it. And if you're roughly my age, you may have also seen him in Kids Incorporated. So it goes back a while. Yep. So Eric is passionate about conservation, and in particular, I admire your dedication to ocean conservation work. And I wanted to thank you both for being here for this kind of Earth Day, kind of the environment matters sort of episode we're doing. So Brenda, I was wondering if you could start us off with explaining how you fell in love with earth science.
Wow. Essentially, I'd have to say it started with college and experiential learning. I just fell in love with the professor who took us out on field trips and showed us all sorts of things. I had no idea that basically the land we stand on has such history and is also archived in the ocean, and that mountains are formed, and so it gives you the sense that the deep past history of time means that what is today may not be existing in the future.
That's a really good way of putting it. And I had a similar experience. It's the geologists in us. So Eric, I know you grew up in the LA area. So you've been here a while, you've seen some things. What sparked your love for the natural world?
Well, interestingly enough, it actually started as a child because my family grew up around Native American ceremonies and Native American culture. And part of what is my, in essence, my spiritual religion, if you were. I mean, my mother's Jewish, and I also grew up these Native American ceremonies. But when I pray, or if you want to call it praying, or when I think about the universe or spirit, I do it through the lens of Native American ceremonies, how I was raised. And those are sweat lodges, Sundance ceremonies. And all of these ceremonies are directly related to the position of the sun. Where it goes from, rises in the east and sets in the west. And we talk about fire and water and the creepy crawlies, my grandpa used to say. and so all of my life, there was this connection to the earth and the world that we touch. And then on top of that, I grew up a beach kid. I was a surfer. I loved the ocean. And really, as soon as I was able to be old enough to be cognizant of what I was seeing around me, you started seeing the change. You started seeing plastic and trash on the beaches, in the sand. And you just inherently knew there was something wrong happening. And when you started seeing it in the water, I can't tell you how many times growing up you started. It wasn't always that way. Even from my youth, I'm only, I'm 46 years old. I was like, how old am I again? I'm 46. I mean, it's not as though, I'm not talking about the 1950s. Even from myself as a child to now, at a certain point in my early youth, I started seeing the water look different. There was just stuff everywhere. And so that was really the spark for me, was what is happening. And then once you have children, it's probably a longer answer to a different question, but once you have children, it really is, we talk about, our future generations and the world and what will happen to it, and, how are we taking care of the planet. I'm sort of baffled and shocked by how many people live on this planet who have children who aren't every day. And not to be catastrophic or nihilistic about the future, but the fact that we don't get up every day in a bit of a panic about what the world will look like for our children. Because now I'm thinking about it. I'm only 10, 20 years away from my children being adults who are going to live in this world and want to go do things that they may not be able to do that we're doing right now. And at some point, I'm going to have, probably in 20 or 30 years, I'm going to have grandchildren. And it really, this sort of hypothetical idea of, well, I won't be here, I'll be gone, I won't know these people, like, I hope it's okay, and, but in 100 years, I won't be here. Very quickly, for me, I feel I will be. And the idea of these children that I love and I care for every day, living in a world that is unlivable, is sort of hard not to want to do something. So, sorry.
You have no.
That was a longer answer than probably.
This is why I invited you on, because I know you care about this. It's like you both come at the caring from a slightly different angle, but there's a really strong shared core here of this wonder about our planet. And look, I wake up panicked and go like, what are we going to do? How are we screwing up today? And how are we fixing it? So I wanted to ask what you each find most compelling these days when you see nature in the news. What's really kind of stuck out to you recently?
Well, actually, I think, I mean, when you look at rivers and lake and water levels, I mean, that's something, and also you look at, tides. I mean, again, being a surfer, I look at what's happening with tides and, beach erosion, tides that are starting to overflow into our infrastructure in cities. Those things concern me, and those are the things I notice a lot. But I also, on a more positive note, I'm seeing things like Ocean Project, and some of these ideas that are starting to be implemented, and the possibility that, wait, maybe there's some hope. And again, I turn to you guys and go, is it possible? Is there any positive news here? I hope. But for me, that's what I think about.
Yeah. I guess what I would say is I was measuring atmospheric rivers of the past in California. I won't date myself how long ago. Measuring wildfires that would burn for a month, and then the monsoon rains, North American monsoon rains, would put it out, even though firefighters were expending a lot of money and energy and time and risking their lives in the mountains of just in the Tucson area of Arizona. And we were studying with isotopic tracers the post-wildfire runoff. Looking at the scale of these type of extreme events, we knew they would increase. We knew from the data, we knew with climate change. Seeing it make headlines now, and that more people are waking up to this, I take as a very positive, what we were studying and people weren't paying attention, we were getting grants for, and it was sitting in journal articles. It's now the daily headlines around the world, really. And that gives me hope, because it can't just be scientists warning about this. It can't just be scientists just thinking about the solutions they come up with. It really is going to involve all of us in an international, multi-generational conversation. And that gives me a lot of hope, because more people are weighing in and coming up with great ideas, and that's where innovation really happens.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
And I'm gonna have a bunch of. I'm gonna pretend to be the not pretend. I am the dummy in the room.
No, hardly.
But the term atmospheric river, is this a term you've been using for a long time that we are just as the public learning about, or is this a new phrase?
I would say that I have been around many scientists who have been studying many things. And when you look at the data, a lot of times we've gone to our communication colleagues and said, how would you talk about this? For example, ocean currents. The person who helped come up with the term global ocean conveyor belt, really everyone could picture this. And it helps describe in a more tangible way to our everyday experience. And so we know the volume of water. This Pineapple Express is another term for it. It comes kind of from the Hawaii area, hits the Pacific Northwest, British Columbia area, then starts moving down the western parts of the United States as the season progresses. And the idea of saying, let's call it an atmospheric river so that people understand just how much rain could be coming is really important. It's not a diffuse event.
Right.
I mean, we are definitely learning how to message things kind of as we go.
And people need this in their daily lives.
They do. And look, if I were to tell you that, you know, I specialize in lava flow morphology, you're going to be like, the what? I go, is the lava oozy or sticky? And then you're like, oh yeah, okay. Like, oozy or sticky? Is it pancake syrup or is it like peanut butter? There you go. Problem solved. So it's like, we have to bridge that communication gap. And it is cool that you hear terms like bomb cyclone and atmospheric river, and people know them now. They don't just look blank and you go, is that a problem? But yeah, if you throw in words like bomb, that people pay attention. Yeah, river, everyone can kind of go, oh, yeah, I know what a river is. So I think it's about finding that commonality. And, you know, you say ocean, and it means so much to you emotionally. But if you say that to somebody from Oklahoma who's never had the opportunity to travel, you got to find ways to relate, like, what the scale of an environment like the ocean is. So the communication is imperfect, but we're all working on it, I think. And that is actually why I wanted you two together, because you both communicate in different ways. So I want to shift tacks just a little bit. We got to go a little ominous, and then we'll pull back from the ominous and go encouraging. But we are in an election year, yet again, in a time when politics is normal. It's ceased to exist. We are not in any charted territory now. So I wanted each of you to give us a window into what you're seeing from your particular peers and colleagues. So in your respective industries, when it comes to how the people that you're surrounded by are taking action, or they're working to prioritize the environment at the ballot box. So what are you seeing from the folks you know the best?
I would say that one opportunity that people may not be as aware of, because again, communication, the Inflation Reduction Act has a lot of climate opportunities within it, a huge down payment on reducing U.S. emissions. And that's going to happen at the local and regional scale. And therefore, who is voted into office will be deciding over the term of their political term very important decisions about infrastructure projects at the local scale and investing. And that is something I think the local elections are going to really make a big deal on how big our down payment is going to be. So some people in the areas where I live, actually, I happen to live in the DC metro area, and I'd say even children they do gerrymandering exercises in their public school. It's really, it's a highly, not where I grew up. It's very, they're very engaged with the political process and understanding what happens. And so that region is really going to be taking advantage of these type of things. And I hope that many other regions around the country will too. So the local elections, I think, are going to matter very much.
I don't want to be a Debbie Downer.
No, it's okay. I want the truth.
So what I am seeing concerns me incredibly. From just take the entertainment world, community, musicians, actors, that world. We have this huge backlash where people are almost afraid to engage politically. It's become almost a faux pas. Like, people are like, we're tired of hearing actors and musicians talk about their politics. Stay in your lane. You know, we don't want to hear it. And at one point, people were like, wait a minute, it's my country too, my world, let me. And then they started seeing that affect their bank account, I think, on some level, or their posterity, or the sort of cancel culture nature of it. And people were like, I'm not really going to talk about politics. I'm not going to talk about, I'll talk about, environmental issues, but if you're not willing to talk about the politics of those issues, you're not really seeing it to its final conclusion. And on top of that, there are huge social disparities between even, liberals and progressives now because of what's happening in Israel and in Gaza. So people who generally would be very aligned and on the same page are sort of now divided. And you're hearing people, say things about, whether it's voting for Biden or voting, Democrat locally, they're sort of, in my opinion, blinded and a little misguided by the sort of TikTok, nature of what they're hearing. And they're just not seeing the forest through the trees. The existential crisis of Donald Trump coming back into office is a cataclysmic event for our country. We will, if he gets elected, we will not get the Senate. We will not have the House. He will repeal Obamacare. There will be a national abortion ban. All of these things will happen, and electric vehicles, anything environmental will be gone. And whether it's gone because he actually passes bills or does it through executive action, it will be gone because nothing moves forward. I mean, that's what we saw during his last presidency. There was 4 years of just nothing happening. He wasn't smart enough or committed enough to actually get anything done to go backwards. But if nothing's moving forward,
we have to act.
Yeah, it's not moving.
Yeah.
And here we have another president. No one's perfect. He's a moderate, but student debt, infrastructure, and even look at the electric vehicle proposal in his budget. To have what was it, 2/3 of all vehicles by 2032?
Yeah, just passed.
Yeah, it's something like that. I don't have the exact number, so you guys know better. But like, these are real solutions to and solutions. No one's saying you can't have your gas car. You can drive your gas car into the ground all you want. But any new vehicle, how there could even be it's such a simple binary choice between good and evil. I don't know.
But I think it's interesting that you said that there's been that backlash, because we've heard about cancel culture, obviously in terms of people being racist and sexist, et cetera, et cetera. It's really interesting that you've seen it when it comes to environmental activism and the politics associated with that. That's kind of surprising.
And I will say, I think it goes beyond just the environmental, but it becomes sort of, people just go, I'm just not going to touch any of it.
Yeah.
I'll talk about art, I'll talk about music, but I'm just not going to touch anything that, wades into the waters of politics, which, environmental issues have a huge part of our political system.
They do. So we're going to try to lift everybody's spirits a little now. Because, we have that, and it's like, whew, okay. But being aware of things like that is really important. So then, kind of on the flip side, what has sort of lifted your spirits? And since, Eric, you had more of a downer kind of thing, what's lifted your spirits recently when it comes to climate crisis activism?
Well, what has lifted my spirits is actually seeing some of the positive things that the Biden administration is currently doing. I think, again, we have a long way to go, but seeing that there are things that are being proposed that, that we actually have an administration who is listening to scientists and interested, in what scientists have to say. And again, for me, I think it goes back to, seeing that, you hope to see more of organizations like Conservation International, which are using, the science to promote, revenue for these bigger companies. Like, if you can convince Coca-Cola or Tesla how to make their battery or make their plastic bottle in a way that is more environmentally friendly and cheaper and will make you more profit, well, that is, it's not, oh God, I don't want to mention his name, but you say Elon Musk, which I don't know if he's God or the devil or both, but, all of these tech guys, we sort of thought they were all, granola-y, hippies from Seattle. They were out to make money. But if they can make money and do it in a way that does impact and improve our environment, then fine. I don't care. Get rich.
Yeah. It's when capitalism intersects with conservationism, then we found a winning route.
Yeah.
We're not going to get rid of capitalism, nor should we ever get rid of conservationism. Those things
Right.
are, they both, I mean, capitalism, you know, yeah, mixed feelings about that. But since we're not an economics show or a system of government show, I can say we are firmly in favor of things that conserve the planet's resources and lets people have more equitable experiences while they're here. So Brenda, anything in particular? I mean, you did say you've been encouraged by the fact that we had the Inflation Reduction Act, which has so much in it that is positive. Anything else that's really been kind of putting some pep in your step when you go to work?
Well, because that is happening, and again, the fact that it just passed, our clean transportation program colleagues are really excited because it's not specifically about EVs, it's that it has standards for emissions, however you want to do it. The free market economy and everything else within a regulated economy, that however you get there, we know probably it's going to involve a huge amount of EVs, and it's up to when these standards go into place, the innovation of the marketplace and the scientists that are within these companies. I will say that sometimes you can hear about disinformation, and one of the discourses of delay for action that I've seen over and over and over is, one, the myth of the individual scientists. For example, the Oppenheimer movie, it's just one scientist. It was not just one. Oftentimes you have to have the archetype, and you distill all these scientists, and scientists need each other to have this innovation. Any company that's run by the myth of the CEO deciding everything is also a myth. And it's up to us as society to figure out where are the guardrails, where are our red lines, and where do we need to pull people in aligned ways. And we're going to have some bumps along the way. And what I see is that tug and pull is happening vigorously. And many people are thinking of solutions that, back of the envelope, probably are not the best ideas. However, outcompete those. I mean, come up with better ideas. Because if you don't come up with a better idea, it's very hard to regulate or stop someone who has an idea as running with it. And sometimes that pulls people in a new direction. And that actually, watching these changes over the years, have happened faster than I would say Congress.
Yeah.
And usually Congress responds to when the innovation is proving itself. And then you see it being, the standard is, oh, here's the standard, because guess what? It's already been proven we can get there. And we're comfortable with that. And when we have a standard, usually people try to make it, and they usually overshoot it. And they say, let's go deeper. So that's usually the pattern. And the fact that we really have something on the books, I'm so excited as a climate scientist. Finally, there's something real.
That's great. And I like seeing you get excited about it because, again, we still have a lot of myth busting. I'm not talking well today, folks. Sorry. But we need some more myth busting around the image of the staid, quiet, older white man in a lab coat. That's your scientist. And you know, we are as diverse as the country in terms of who we are, what we do, what we like, what we believe in, what we get excited about. And scientists look like all of us. So anyway, good job being a model for scientific excitement. But I did want to ask, how have you seen the way scientists engage with activists? How has that changed over the course of your career?
Really great question. In the beginning, I would say that when I literally reached my personal red line saying, I cannot publish one more paper that's talking about the problem when no one is doing anything as far as I could tell. So I joined the Union of Concerned Scientists to really learn the other areas of how can our science be much more practical and understandable for an advocacy organization that can get that in the hands of decision makers in ways that they most understand. And we learned that use-informed science, really, we are sitting on the data, and we can give you different slices that matter to a dairy farmer, or matter to maybe someone who's trying to figure out why do we have to rely on lithium for energy? Carbon is a very abundant element, or there are other experiments going on in Department of Energy and other places. We're gonna find we don't have to depend just on the rare earths. If we keep investing in the federal infrastructure, the corporate research and development, and ideas all around the world. People have many ideas. So that is something that I would say more scientists are learning in the climate field, how to be much more creating studies that are more use-informed science, working with communities that are frontline communities that are dealing with the impacts of climate change first and worst. And so that shift is very powerful, because then the science that's being done is much more user-friendly and practical.
Yeah, it's not just curiosity for curiosity's sake, which is valuable, but it's also, what's the purpose here? Who does this help? Who does this impact? And kind of a follow-on from that, Eric, I wanted to know what you think that scientists can do to help mobilize people in Hollywood to use evidence-based, climate-friendly business practices. Because, I mean, Hollywood does, it generates a lot of wealth, but it also consumes a lot of resources.
Yeah, and I sit across two industries that, are not the most environmentally friendly, being Hollywood and fashion. So it's an issue that we face all the time. But I will say, there isn't a nature to Hollywood and to the artists around it that do want to do right. You see a lot of things on sets, especially especially in Canada. You can't go on a set that doesn't have composting, recycling, cans and placements, and we're seeing it, little things, even down to there used to be a time when those little plastic water bottles were everywhere on movie sets and television sets, and it got to the point where when you saw them, you were like, that's offensive. And now you're seeing, you're seeing productions, the beginning of production, they'll gift the crew all water bottles. But what I think for me that scientists can maybe do to help Hollywood is, again, figure out how to make it a revenue source. How does the environmental impact of what they're doing, make it better, cheaper, faster to create what they're creating? What are the options? Where can solar be used on sets to help power base camps and trucks? And if you're not having to drive, because lots of television movie productions, one of the biggest costs of those productions is the movement. It's one thing when you're on a soundstage, that's fine, but when you're shooting an epic thing that Mission Impossible.
87. Right?
Yeah, Mission Impossible, and it's going, across 15 different countries or 10 different countries, and you've got 200 or 300 people that you're moving around the world. Well, convincing them that, the reason that truck is so expensive to move all your equipment is because of the gas, is there, using an electric vehicle that is produced by this, I think, again, my opinion is we haven't reached an altruistic enough place that people are simply going hey, this is the right thing to do. I still think we have to incentivize their core needs, which are not wholly nefarious. I mean, wanting to make money to provide for your family and have a good life. I mean, they're not just not all just money hungry people going I just want to be as rich as I can. I think
there's a few of those. But
there's a few of those. I mean,
by and large,
I mean,
most are not.
Murdoch names like that come to mind. I don't know. But so I think that is figuring out how to help Hollywood do it in a more economical way that is more environmentally friendly. Because you still see it. I mean, there's a lot of waste on those sets. And there are ways to make it more efficient. So that would be the thing that I would think science can help them the most.
So is there, to your knowledge, is there any consultant sort of group that helps production companies be greener?
There are
Really?
several. There are several. There are companies that do it now.
Wow.
There are companies that will greenify. Is that the word? There's a better word.
Close enough.
But there are companies that will come in and they do. There are consultant companies that come in and say, here, use these type of plates for your catering. Use this for the bathrooms.
Wow.
Here's how to use down to even like porta potties and things like that are more wastewater efficient, things like that. I mean, yeah, there are companies that do that.
There's a career option for anybody listening who's thinking, how do I blend entertainment and the environment? There
Absolutely,
you go.
Yeah.
And that's something that wouldn't have existed, 20 years ago? I mean, it's sort of like podcasting as a job was not a thing. I mean, radio hosting, yes, but this format is new. A lot of things are new, thanks to the wonder of digital everything. The wonder and the horror. But now to kind of turn the Hollywood and science thing on its head, so Brenda, we know that films like Don't Look Up have attempted to engage the public about climate change. And then Oppenheimer kind of engages with science and politics in a certain way. But, these have varying degrees of success, right? So what would you like to see Hollywood do more of as a media consumer and as a scientist?
Well, it's really interesting because some of the things that people may not realize, that the costs of renewables are cheaper than fossil fuels. The challenge is the infrastructure that makes it accessible and having that in your remote location or things like that. Whereas the military is very concerned about getting off fossil fuels because the amount of money they have to spend on it in remote locations, renewables are usually the best source. So what I would love to see is not just dystopian stories about the future. People don't want to usually walk out feeling like the world's going to blow up. It's not. The planet's going to be here. It's more about saving ourselves and our fellow living creatures on this planet, that they have more habitable zones than what we're on track to be leaving them and ourselves. So, for example, I mean, if you want to have a peppy race scene, you should use an EV because it has 90% efficiency and that power goes, you're off the blocks, and have it race against the ICE car, the internal combustion engine, and just show that delay and that grumbling, and it just can't keep up, right? I mean, just show the difference. Just literally show the difference and have fun with it.
I mean, I would love to see a Prius or a Tesla, something fully electric, just smoke, your Chevy Camaro.
It's literally impossible to beat an electric with a nice car at the beginning, And so
I just got my first Rivian. I got a Rivian truck, and it's so fun pulling up next to guys in like Porsches and whatevers, because I'm like, I'm gonna smoke you, and it's sort of fun too because. Oh yeah, it's a nice reminder that they're,
that acceleration.
There's a lot. Like I also was hearing that there's going to be an award. They're tracking which films have it, and even just a part of the line, a part of the storyline, just a mention of climate change, and not just. And so they're very few, and so just incorporating it into the story in a subtle way, because let's face it, we already have this level of climate change, and people don't want to talk about it. And yet we're on track to accelerate even further. So we're not even talking about today's level of climate change. And so it's in our lives, it's all around the world, and yet we don't talk about it. And yet, who are the best storytellers? I have to say, right here, just down the road from where we are, amazing storytelling. I'm a fan.
Yeah.
I mean, the question for me, I mean, when you say like, there are plenty of dystopian stories that sort of say, here's what it will look like, and here's, how we,
doom.
Yeah, and the closest thing, to a sort of happy ending is usually getting off the planet to some new,
I hate that.
Because you know what? This planet is many more resources to deal with and work with than on Mars or anywhere else. That's way harder science problem.
Yeah.
I mean, just back of the envelope science. You don't do this.
Yeah. But the question I have is like, what are those stories? What do they look like? How do you create enough conflict purely from a storytelling standpoint? Yeah. But when you think about something like, the first thing that came to mind was Apollo 13. Because you go, well, there's a story that is inherently about the will to survive, overcoming the odds. There is no look. There's guys going to the moon. Something went wrong, and they got to solve it, and they do. Yeah, and it has the same emotional effect as Deep Impact, where it did. The asteroid hit the planet. It
Spoiler.
Obliterated most of it. And I'm glad that you're standing on top of what was the Capitol and saying we will rebuild. Still pretty, but it does, I do think there is something that inherently it makes people go, I don't really want to deal with this, because if that's the best outcome that Hollywood or whatever can come up with, which is to say, most of you are going to be gone.
Bye.
A small band of you will survive and rebuild. Good luck. And that's the best hope. But you think about, how do you take that Apollo 13 story, and what I would say to scientists is maybe scientists could help us find those stories. Because I don't know that we know them or even are looking for them.
I agree. I think that it will be more like the Apollo 13 story, because there are going to be a lot of challenges along the way in these unsung heroes that are really triumphing. But to tell those stories will be fascinating, because we already are in it. There's going to be two levels of change. Either we're going to change ourselves an immense amount, which involves a lot of conflict and change and challenges, which we're experiencing right now.
Yeah.
And that, if we succeed in that changing ourselves, which will be a lot of change, we will keep the Earth closer to the world we know. And therefore, that's the most conservative choice for the planet, but we have to change ourselves immensely. Whereas if we keep doing what we're doing now, then we will be on the Earth changing at a pace that we will be so reacting to change. We will be in talk about survival, it will be more like the dystopian. So having more stories about that harder path to take is changing ourselves and our systems and our relations with each other and trade and how we live and work and play. That is a huge, rife area of conflict.
I have a question about what you just said that I want to ask you, if you don't mind. But also, I think that, I don't know if this is profound in any way, but I think there's something really interesting here. And I don't know who's actually doing it right now. I'm trying to think I can't think of the name of the production company that was really making a lot of documentaries for many years over the last decade, and they sort of became a go-to place about interesting social and environmental documentaries, and I just can't think of the name of the company.
You'll think of it as soon as we leave.
Yeah, but on the narrative side, the scripted side, I don't know of a production company you think about J.J. Abrams, you think about different people's production companies and where they sort of focus their energy and what people are bringing them. Maybe Leonardo DiCaprio, and I don't know fully, but clearly, look, his Killers of the Flower Moon is not that. Right. I suppose, Don't Look Up is.
That was, yeah.
But again, Don't Look Up was I found it to be sort of condescending, a little bit, sarcastic tone of it. It wasn't Apollo 13.
It wasn't engaging, let's bring people in.
Yeah, it was sort of. It was in a lot of ways it was no different than the doom and gloom sort of apocalyptic, because it was nobody's listening and we're trying to tell
and everyone died.
Yeah, and everyone so. but I'm sure there are so many stories, and I'm now. Do I have time for me to get my mission? But I do think there's really something. There is something really interesting about somebody saying, bring us those stories, those novels, those articles, those ideas of, for me, again, I go back to the kids and the guys who created the Ocean Project, the Ocean Cleanup Project. Yeah. What a neat wait, it's just a big piece of rubber?
Yeah.
That's it?
Some of the simplest solutions are the most ancient.
And look, I can only imagine what it took to get that. That kid who was this genius kid, and then how do you get the boats and the funding and the thing? If you could see that movie where you meet this kid and you follow him, and at the end of the movie he's standing on the deck of his ship where the first giant. That is a triumphant story, a la we've seen it in sports. We see it with Rudy or with, whatever. I do think if you can tell that story.
It's like an underdog story.
It's an underdog story in so many ways.
We are the underdog.
Yeah.
Now we've done it to ourselves, though, which is part of it.
But I think, it's a bigger problem. I thought about it with the news recently, because somehow some positive news story popped up in like my social media.
What?
And I was like,
Positive?
and I was like, oh wow, that was so great.
Yeah.
And I was like, what would happen to people if for like one day they only got fed positive stories? Not like, here's a cute kitten story.
But I love those.
But I know. Yeah, they're great.
That's why people turn to them.
But like, what if the news for that day said, hey, there was this political issue and it got solved today. Or there was a crisis in this country and it got ended this way.
Yeah. They talked to each other and they didn't kill everyone.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because for all of, unfortunately it's human nature. We focus on the cataclysmic and bad and negative but what would happen to our psyches if we did get fed like, oh wait, they did fix that problem at that factory where the worker were, we don't really hear about that. We only hear about Kanye West said this and da-da-da's doing that. But if you could do that same thing with environmental issues and start giving people heroes and give them a Han Solo.
But I think that's how you made me think of something. A lot of people, and scientists in particular, have been conditioned for a very long time that you can only talk about what you've done from like a degree of removal. You can't say, oh, I just came up with this brilliant idea. No, you have to go, well, I submitted it for peer review and hopefully they'll publish it. So it may be easier to get people to tell these stories if we ask them not, Brenda, what is the best thing you ever did scientifically? If I said, Brenda, what was the most inspirational thing you saw one of your colleagues solve or come up with or, test? And you'd probably have an easier time tooting their horn than tooting your own horn.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think maybe that's it, is to farm those ideas would be to ask scientists to, it's sort of like nominate your colleague for this award, like which we do. All of the big professional societies give you opportunities to nominate people.
Yeah.
So maybe that's where you look for the stories, and then you got to engage the folks who can get money together, get the producers on board. But I like this, and we do need to be seeing more collaboration, because there are scientists who are really great storytellers. It just hasn't been emphasized in the history of science. Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
For the people who just listening to audio, Brenda pointed to me for some unknown reason. But no, I thank you very much. And I did want to I have like a kind of a pie in the sky question for you both, right? So if I told you that I could guarantee that every single American would hear one thing about the environment or climate that's really important, and that thing would get to every single American in the country, what would that one thing you would love more than anything else for them to hear? What would that be? I know, right? I can play the Jeopardy music.
I mean, mine would be really simple.
Okay.
It would be simply, you have to stop using single-use plastics. I mean, that to me is the...
And it's so fundamental.
Yeah.
So fundamental. I was thinking about that the other day because I went to put something in my fridge, and it was something that would have gone well in a plastic baggie. And I don't use them once. I get them, and then I reuse them and wash them and reuse them. And I was thinking, well, how did they sell strawberries and blueberries in the grocery store? I mean, they've always been in plastic since I was a kid. So then I'm like, oh, wow, when did all this plastic invade our everyday lives, and what would we do without it? So yeah, the single-use plastics, they're awful.
Yeah, that would be mine. I mean, because like look at companies like Rezip. I love them. And have you seen they're amazing.
Describe it.
Rezip they're like a silicone or some kind of they're reusable Ziploc bags.
Yeah.
And they're great. And we have like probably 20 of them in our house, and then we have different sizes, and you just
They're easy to clean.
They're easy to clean. You rinse them out, hang them up, and it's not, and it is no burden. It actually does make your life easier. It's one less thing you have to think about going to buy at the store. Yeah. And those are the things, because I think the problem is making it more convenient. Because if I want to go, you can tell everyone, no, you should go to your local farmer's market on Sundays to buy your fruit. Well, good luck.
Yeah, especially if you have kids or work obligations. It doesn't always work out well.
Yeah, and so if you need fruit, the strawberries are in a plastic thing.
Yeah.
And how we get that to stop is, but single-use plastic to me is, I want everyone to know they really need to stop using single-use plastics.
It's a good one, Brenda. You're like, oh God, there are so many choices.
Exactly. I think the main thing is to talk about what your favorite solution is and how it's affecting your life and what you love about it, because a lot of people think some of these solutions are scary, and it's scary to change what we've known. And a lot of times I share my solutions with people wherever I go, and it's amazing because people are curious, they really want to know, and you who have experienced one of those solutions tell about it. And I love that when the power goes out in my neighborhood, my solar panels and the power walls are keeping the lights on. I love when people come over and ask about my AV. It's just a whole different level of conversation.
You need to meet Ed Begley Jr.
Yeah.
Because he was
Exactly.
on, like, I think the 5th episode of this show that I did, and I went to his house, and it's LEED Platinum certified, and I mean, you would never know, right? But then he starts explaining, well, you know, the windows are this efficient, and the shades do this, and my roof is covered, and you can't even see the solar panels from the street. But yeah, it's amazing the way you can incorporate that into your everyday life.
So what I would do is ask your local leaders, what are they doing to help communities? Because the money's flowing to overcome the reason people can't do this. And I can tell you from experience, it is no fun to go into debt to do these things. It really is not. The price is too high. So right now, the plans for overcoming those initial costs that pay off way. It's the gift that keeps on giving. Like literally, the what you invest gets paid off so quickly. It is so much cheaper. But people don't. That barrier is so big. This Inflation Reduction Act, all these programs that are happening locally, seize them now. Say, what are you doing for this community? How are you changing? How are you going to be role models? Well, what are you doing with the government buildings? Why are you not taking advantage of this?
I actually think that's incredibly interesting and insightful because it's a conversation I've been having with my mother. Because my mom is 78 years old, and saying, I really want to get solar for my house. And as much as I want that, I'm also saying to her, because if their programs are out there, they're not being marketed properly because I don't understand them.
That's right. It's a huge
And
issue.
so what I say to her is, Mom, I don't know if this is worth it for us to do to your house. I mean, and look, it's not an easy conversation to have with your 78-year-old mother, but I'm like, Mom, this is something that, in 20 or 30 years will pay off for you. But I don't is this where you really want to put your $10,000 or $15,000? I mean, I don't know. I want you to enjoy your life, right? And I don't know that I can't find. I've Googled them because you get these you get served ads that say you can get solar, and you're like, do you know that the government has a program? And you're like, but do they really, or is that a gimmick from some contractor saying? And I can't find them. Do you know where to look for them?
A lot of it depends on what your local state is doing and your locality, and then the federal. And luckily, because I was at UCS, our policy folks were telling me when these things were kicking in, and so I took advantage of them. Uh-huh. And so literally, taxpayers paid me to drive a more efficient vehicle. And because I know so much about the climate, I knew I had to get myself down to zero and my family is down to zero as fast as possible because I know the consequences too much and I didn't want to be contributing to it. So for me, that was worth going to debt. But most people, that's not the case. And it's understandable. That's why we have to have communication colleagues really help the government and local officials convey that, because at least some things are getting smarter. It used to be, a tax credit. Well, that's only for the super who are doing deductions, right?
Yeah.
No. These are for and literally now they're saying, no, we're going to give it to you right there when you get the car. It's direct. It's not that makes more sense.
It does. It makes more of an impact.
Right at the dealership or whatever. So we can do this. It's not rocket science to do this.
So basically, this is where, going to whatever city your mom lives in, going to their local government and saying what programs exist, and just keep asking until somebody finally answers. And the problem is, there is no clear one-size-fits-all information repository. And then with the way that things are weighted from the different search engines, you may never get to the answer that actually is out there. So we need to have you in touch with our Western States team. They're based in California.
All right.
And whatever resources we end up sharing with Eric, people who are listening and watching, I will put them on the page for this episode as well. So the resources will live there for other people. So actually, what you said about all your conservation activities, I literally have my next question. What's your personal favorite conservation activity? So why don't I'll let Eric go first on this one, though, because I know you've engaged in a lot of different conservation activities.
I mean, my favorite is a beach cleanup. You know,
Okay.
It's something that I can take my children to do. They can see the impact of it. They can also see the consequence of what is happening. Even my 5.5-year-old, it's very clear. He can see that this trash shouldn't be here, and how much nicer it looks when it's gone. And it's very simple for him to understand. So for me, it's a beach cleanup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very tangible.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful. You're at a beach.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Brenda. What's
Mine
yours?
is it's been this choice for a long period. I chose to continue sharing my energy and skills with Union of Concerned Scientists because I get to work with colleagues who know better than I, as a scientist, how to reduce the emissions that really will lift ecosystems around the world, people who are struggling to deal with the ravages of climate change of today. And so that's my favorite activity.
And I would say, oh, wow, UCS must be paying you to say that. But I know that it's true. I've been at the organization a little over a year, and the level of dedication and commitment is unreal. And it's not just the scientists who actually work there. It's every staff member is super committed to, and we cover a whole breadth of things. I mean, everything from climate to like heavy duty electric vehicles. I mean, everything in between, and even like food and environment. We go up again and highlight the nefarious, I love that word you used earlier, but the nefarious activities of big, large-scale corporations around food, like Tyson, and what they do that is not good for the planet or for people. So, but everybody seems to just genuinely want to make the world a better place. And so, I mean, it's kind of cool that you highlighted that. I was not expecting that, so well done. I figured you might say beaches, because I know how much you love the ocean,
Yes.
but that's all right. Brenda she was like, oh, well, I got something different, little curveball. So there is a signature sort of question I ask people at the end of this, and the funny thing is you've all used the word several times, and it's literally in the name of the org. I always ask people, and it is a two-parter though, I've changed it, it's not just one. So the first part, which I will give you, is again, we're at UCS, Union of Concerned Scientists. Why are you concerned? And I'd like Brenda to go first this time.
I'm concerned because I know people around the world are experiencing the consequences of climate change, and the more we talk about it, I think the more we'll be able to converge on helping each other. A lot of the solutions to climate change are actually challenges we as a human species have been dealing with for eons. And so working to help all those issues will help us figure out better ways to work together so we can help realize we really are on this one blue marble, and it really is 70% ocean. So the ocean's everything. And the more we talk about how precious this is for ourselves, we can maybe, that gives me the biggest concern, is when we spend so much time attacking each other. That gives me great concern.
And so Eric, why are you concerned?
I mean, I sort of alluded to this when we first started talking, but for me it is, very personally my children, but also, as a parent now, having small children, there's a weird sense, every child kind of becomes yours a little bit. When I see another little kid at the park crying, you sort of go, if the moms or the dad, you sort of, there's a little bit of you go, that's, could be my, you can't just, and so you start to feel that concern about children everywhere who are dealing with famine, heat, water shortages. I'm empathetic to adults on some level as well.
Yeah. Some of us.
But when you think about, we saw it when I was a kid. I remember, that you'd see those sort of commercials for, African children dealing with famine. You'd see the sort of Biafra baby with, the distended belly and, bones. And now, that's happening in many ways all over the world. And children don't deserve, you know, it's like that weird thing that people used to say, it's like a parent who says to their kid, like, I brought you into this world, you're like, yeah, exactly. Like, they didn't ask to be here.
Yep.
This wasn't, they didn't crawl in, inside your belly or in, whatever. The idea that we don't have the greatest responsibility and debt to them, for me, that's what concerns me.
Yeah. And so we don't want to end on a downer, because it's a profound sort of thing to think about. But I do like to kind of, let's bring it back up. The second part of the question is, and we'll kick it back to you, what are you doing about that concern?
Well, I think the biggest thing that I would say I honestly am doing is trying to live by example. I mean, that is really the sort of, old adage of, think globally, act locally is really the best piece of advice that anyone ever gave me, because there are so many problems to solve. Which one is the one you're going to take on? For me, I live by the ocean. I live by the beach. Look, we could get on a whole nother conversation about meat and, farming and cows and, unfortunately I have to leave that to somebody else who maybe lives closer to that. And then I'll focus on this, and by the time we all get together, we can all do something. But for me, I think it's leading by example and leading for my children, to say, like, hey, we don't buy these type of things, and we don't just throw this out, or we go here and we do this and we clean up our beach, and even when like when we go to the beach, we don't ever, like, it's not just it has to be this giant beach cleanup with 20 friends and a thing and a thing and a thing. When we go to the beach, we bring a bag. We, when we set up our blanket and our things, we walk around. We clean up for 10 minutes before we lay down, and we get our surfboards out and we do our thing. We do a little, that's just something we do every time we go. And so, for me, that's what we're doing.
That's great. And Brenda, what are you doing about your concern?
Well, because I am concerned, I really follow the spheres of influence where you have the most impact is yourself, your spheres of influence, that your community, who you interact with most with. That's where I focus on, making sure I'm doing that as well as I possibly can and show up in the best way. And that has ripple effects, because each person has their spheres of influence, and it really, instead of thinking halfway around the world and all those other things. The other thing is, because I know that historically the U.S. has contributed the most cumulative, if you do country level emissions, to the problem of climate change. I'm very glad that I'm here in the United States working on this issue, because I think it will have a big impact when the U.S. really is changing. And this is a big down payment, this Inflation Reduction Act. If we do it well, it could really make a difference for the whole world.
Yeah.
That's great. And I just have to say that I really enjoyed this. I mean, it's the first time I've been able to do like a two-person discussion. Like, what are we talking about here? I just hope that people who hear this and see it on YouTube are inspired to go and talk across fields, because I think that that transdisciplinary collaboration, when you have people with different viewpoints trying to solve problems, that's how great thinkers did things back in the day. They had salons in Europe, and they brought the artists and the poets and the scientists and the doctors and the street sweepers sometimes, but the people who worked like on physical trades too. I think that is where we're going to find, the kind of the union of all of our voices to make change that's going to take care of the kids and the planet and our future, and lead to the Apollo 13 ending, not the Deep Impact Doom ending.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.